hello. So we don't have a moderator. Does anyone mind if I just commandeer the situation? All right. So welcome everyone to the golden age of animated SF, a panel that I'm very, very excited about and very happy to be on. So I'm just going to read the panel description. We're in a golden age of animation. Animated form and content have been pushed in ambitious ways, both through storytelling and technology, in film, for instance, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, amazing, TV, Avatar The Last Airbender, and streaming services, Love, Death and Robots by WorldCon's very own John Scalzi. But few have received recognition. We discuss what titles are doing well, how animation, both traditional and CGI and live action, have influenced each other, and what fans should look out for. So, Mari, do you mind if I ask you to start us off?
Sure, I'm Mari Ness. I'm on this panel primarily because of the Disney Read Watch, which was going through the entire Disney animated canon and comparing it to the original source material. That's a lot of movies. And also because Team Voltron, if you end and say that it ended in season 6, we're just going to pretend that for a few glorious moments, as well as other animated films. I'm really enthusiastic, but I'll let others go.
Hi, so I'm Eliza Chan. I am a fantasy writer, and I'm basically on this panel as a massive fangirl. I grew up on anime, but very much moved into everything, and I just absolutely love the genre, and I love the fact that it's no longer seen as immature and childish. Now we can embrace and openly say, yes, I enjoy cartoons.
Hi, I'm Ed Kramer. I go by Edward as well. For many, many years, I've been involved in computer animation since it was done with analog computers back in the late 70s.
Holy shit.
And, and then my career culminated with 12 years working for some guy named Lucas. And worked on a number of Star Wars films, and in a little while here, when it fits into the panel, I'm just going to take 3.5 minutes and show you just a collection of the shots and the films that I was very fortunate to be able to work on at Industrial Light and Magic.
Amazing. So freaking cool. Okay. Hi, my name is Amal Muhtar. I'm a writer. I write short fiction, poetry, and I just had a book come out called This Is How You Lose the Time War, which I co-wrote with Max Gladstone. I am on this panel because I am a tremendous consumer of cartoons. I use cartoons medicinally in a lot of ways. And I also have I probably worked Steven Universe into most of my critical discussion. I'm also a critic. I write the science fiction fantasy column for the New York Times, and I sort of can't dissociate my critical faculties from cartoons. I think that there is no contradiction there, and they inform a lot of the stuff that I do, to the point where, even though I'm not supposed to say this, This Is How You Lose the Time War is sort of Steven Universe fanfiction. So, you know, bear that in mind.
Can we all just fan out about Steven Universe and
yes,
the Star Wars animations?
Can we fan out? The answer is yes.
I brought plenty of stuff. If you want to fan out, you're gonna be able to fan out on some of the stuff I've set up here.
So I'd really love to hear just your thoughts about the question specifically is, you know, first there was, are animated stories genre or not, versus, you know, what makes animation so well suited to genre. So I'd love to just hear you kind of talk a little bit about where you feel those intersections happen.
Well, one of the things that that makes it hard to answer this question is that now animation is part of live action. I mean, the dragons in Game of Thrones, do you call that animation? I mean, I would call it animation. Animators had to create the character, but it's animation that's taking place within a live action realistic universe. So, you know, it's not an entire film or an entire show about the dragons. You know, the entire show is not animated, but you know, so it gets real tricky as far as trying to define, you know, even what do you want to call animation.
Take the Lion King.
Oh. I just heard someone say The Lion King. This is so I literally had never thought that until you just said it, and it's sort of blowing my mind. Oh yeah, we take I have definitely realized I'm taking for granted that CGI elements of live action things, I'm realizing I don't class them as animation, but I think they are. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I never really thought of that either. And when I was thinking about this panel, for me, I was also thinking things like stop motion. Is that animation? I mean, obviously we have to animate the frames, but is it more of an art? And then there's been a lot of different groundbreaking things happening, you know, like the way they filmed Scanner Darkly. Is that animation? You know, they were actors doing it in the first place. I don't know the answer to that. To come back to your original point about science fiction and fantasy, so for me, actually, I grew up with a lot of anime in my household, and I do think science fiction fantasy is, in a way, the easiest genre of anime that's come across to the sort of Western wider world. But actually, animation can be anything, and slice of life stuff I really love, and I think a lot of that is actually coming forward as well. I think potentially the dominant force is still science fiction and fantasy within that, but actually animation can be anything you want it to be.
When we're talking about what is animation, the film I really wanted to recommend is The Girl Without Hands, which is a French film, and it is technically animation, but what it is watercolor paintings. And he did a series, it is one person, this was not a team effort of any kind, except somebody else did the music, and he hired voice actors. But it is a series of watercolor paintings that he then filmed in an animated way. I count it as animation. I think that is something that sort of borders our line of how exactly are we defining it. And I do recommend it. It with the caveat that yes, it's The Girl Without Hands.
And my experience of watching Tuca and Birdie is of finding myself hungrier and hungrier for what is happening to my brain via the stuff on the screen. I'm actually curious from the perspective of someone in the industry, what are you trying to do? Do you have a sense of what you're trying to do to the viewers when you're creating it? What is like the objective?
The objective is whatever the director wants. And it's true, because we're, as animators working on feature films, it really is whatever the director's vision is what you're tasked with creating up on the screen. So if the director wants to make a comedy as a parody of Star Trek with a big rock monster running around chasing people, well then you create the rock monster, and then you have a team of animators, and this is kind of how I would define animation.
Yeah.
Is it done by someone who claims to be an animator?
I like it. Yeah.
And you have people who are animators, but there's a number of different job functions that it takes to create these things. I mean, somebody will rig the rock monster so that it can be moved, you know, or the creature or the dragon or whatever. So there's a lot of different people involved in the process. Somebody will build the geometry that is then going to be able to move, and it has to be built in a particular way so that the polygons move properly. When you pull the arm, you don't get bends and creases and stretches and things. So there's artists that have to just be involved in how to build things, and then there's artists who actually make them move, who are called the animators, although we're all, you know, part of that team. Then there's people that have to light the animated creature so that it looks like it fits into the world that all the live action people are in, and that means if there's an actor, you know, and a dinosaur passes in front of him, well, the dinosaur has to cast a shadow onto the actor.
Oh my gosh.
And if the actor moves, they have to cast a shadow onto the dinosaur. How do you make that happen? If a dinosaur jumps up on a table that's made out of aluminum, you know, in the kitchen, you got to see the reflection of the dinosaur, but they shot that table live action.
Right.
How do you do that? And there's other artists that do what's called match moving, which is to create a virtual camera in the computer that exactly tracks what the actual camera did when they were filming on the set, so that the CGI dinosaur moving around on the table when the camera pans, the dinosaur has to pan. So there's a lot of different things that have to happen. There's compositors. We worked on we worked on a movie called Twister.
I saw Twister.
Now, is that an animated film? I don't know, but we certainly had to animate the flying cow, and we had to, and in The Perfect Storm, there's huge ocean waves. Yeah. And we had to animate those ocean waves, so there's a lot that goes into just the term animation. So I don't, there's a lot of, really smart thinking people who write a lot of articles about, genres and all that. I just do what they, what they tell me I need to do that day.
I think I genuinely, this is extremely ignorant, and I apologize for even burdening you with my ignorance, but I think I genuinely thought that CGI involved a lot of people just sitting at computers exclusively, not so much getting up with the kind of like bendy bits of things. But
every animator I know has a mirror at their desk, and they're constantly performing their animation for themselves. I mean, you're getting so excited. There's rooms full of people doing this.
So let's talk about realizing the golden age then. And what were those moments for you?
Well, I'd kind of like to take this in just a slightly different direction, because there was a golden age of CGI. There was a time before the Avengers, and what we can do now with CGI is spectacular, but it's too much. And there was a time in the early days of CGI, which was the early 1990s, up until the early 2000s, and I was very, very fortunate to have been at Industrial Light and Magic, by the way, with Katrina Stovall sitting here in the front. She also worked on The Mummy. At that time, we weren't jaded to CGI. So I think we're past the golden age of CGI. There was a time where each movie that came out, when we did Jumanji, for instance, it was amazing to see these animated monkeys and this animated lion. And now, the difference between the lion from Jumanji and the lion from The Lion King is two quantum leaps in technology. But I think, in that early time, we went to the movies to be astonished by the CGI effects. And now we're so jaded to it, we can, every shot has CGI in it to some degree or another. Every shot in almost every movie now, you look in the list of the top 10 grossing movies of all time, and I think 9 of them are CGI heavy movies. And so I think we've passed the golden age of CGI, and now we're into the age of like, I've seen it. Cartoons were from very early on, from the 1930s. The Fleischer Studios, all the Betty Boops and the Popeye, and if you watch those, you'll see those are adult themed. Those were made for adults. They were not made for kids.
Right. There are a lot more diversity among creators. The fact that Rebecca Sugar is the first woman who's also non-binary woman, I think, is what she identifies as, heading a show on Cartoon Network. Also, the fact that a lot of animators are not based in the States now for shows that are being distributed in North America.
And I think, in a way, we have a lot of these panels on diversity and things like that, and you always hear the stories from Hollywood saying, we just didn't have the right actors to cast for that. It is so much easier in animation, obviously, because you can change the skin tone, you can, you know, look into these things on the sort of surface aesthetic level. It is easier to include that diversity that should be everywhere, but also behind the scenes is another thing, is voices. It does not matter what colour your skin is. If you have the voice that suits that character, then that voice works. And what I found, for example, I didn't realise a lot of the cast of Steven Universe were incredibly diverse, and I'm glad, but at the same time it didn't matter. It didn't at all matter, because it was more about that voice. So I just feel that the animation that has that potential to doubly support the behind the scenes work. I'm sure you can tell us actually what it's like behind the scenes in terms of queerness and diversity and things like that, but also to show it in front. So I feel like that's leading the field compared to other sort of TV shows and films, personally.
Well, there's also the matter of who do you hire, you know. So I think that when you go see a film, an animated film, you don't know who the people were that were brought on to create that animation. And you know, there's issues about, you know, diversity in the workforce itself. And you know, I'd love for you to be able to talk about that, because that's kind of one of the things that you've been studying. But we really do need to be concerned about the diversity in the people behind the scenes and the hiring process.
Can I just say something?
Go, please, ahead, yeah.
To address Eliza's point, that you were saying that the...
Oh, would you like a microphone, by the way? Let me just bring one.
Sure. Okay.
Is there a wireless one? Okay, great. Is it on? Yes.
Just the point that you made about the appearance of the animation and then the voice actors potentially being any background. I think one of my big concerns, because right now I'm actually working on a PhD about diversity in media production, and that can also have kind of the opposite effect when people say, look, we've got like this brown or black character, it doesn't matter if a white person is the one doing the voice. And I think we need to be really vigilant about that. But also the writers, I think, are huge, because you can turn somebody, a character, you can, you know, as you said, change their skin tone, but if you don't actually have authentic experiences, they're gonna kind of default to the white lens of things.
That's a really, really good point. And I would say that was one of the delights that I found in looking at the cast of Steven Universe. On that point, I cannot recommend enough Craig of the Creek. Is one of the most beautiful cartoons. It is absolutely the emotional successor in my heart to Steven Universe. You have a thing, or...
Well,
okay.
You know, I don't know if we should show this, because it's just a collection of shots that I worked on, but I did want to put in a shameless plug, because when we talk about the golden age of animation, what I'm doing right now, I'm making a film, a documentary called The Wizards of Hollywood. Ooh. And what I'm doing is I'm talking to a lot of the artists who worked on the original Star Wars movie, Terminator 2, the original Jurassic Park, and getting the human side, the stories from these artists, and I'm creating a documentary about the people that created the animated effects, because we all know the directors, we know the actors, but we don't know who were the match movers, who were the texture painters, who did the hair and cloth simulation. So I feel that it's really important to get the word out to the public that there are people that are behind all this animation, especially during the early years of CGI. So if you want to go to www.wizardsofhollywood.com, I would love for you to take a look at the trailer that's already there. And I just wanted to get a little